what does grid stability mean? Grid stability means that the voltage remains constant, the generation and consumption remains balanced, there are no disruptions, and there are no blackouts or unwarranted interruptions, as we call it. So how does that happen? With renewable energy growing, when we say renewable, it is something over which nobody has got a control. Like nobody controls the sunrise or sunset, nobody controls the duration for which you'll have wind. So these are the two major sources of renewables that we normally use in our country. There are others also, but these are the two major ones that we are normally looking into. So this is like dependent badly on weather. So at times, say if wind is very high at the night, your generation will be higher at the night. If your generation is, if wind speed is not enough, you don't get generation. Then depending on the weather, your solar generation will vary. So what happens, what you practically see, people who are working in power plant or are associated with power plant will be seeing like the frequency, the voltage, everything changes as soon as it is 9 o'clock, things start changing and things settle down as you get down to 6 o'clock. So this is what is affecting your grid stability. So what is happening is your frequency is varying, your voltage is varying, so you are not getting consistent power. At times there are disruptions. Of late we had a disruption in South Gujarat whereby there was a loss of power. Yes, it was not attributed to renewables, but renewable is one of the contributor that forces things. So as I told you, when we say grid stability, it means balancing the supply and demand, maintaining the voltage and frequency, and there is a resilience to disturbance. Say if one source goes, the other source is able to ramp up and meet the demand. Otherwise, what you need to do is it needs to be there along with load shedding. Load shedding is something which is not considered desirable under current operating circumstances. Nobody wants their power to go. Okay, whether it is for your home, business, or anywhere you are, you want an uninterrupted power supply throughout the day. So what are the challenges? It will be easier to say that grid needs to be stable, all these things need to happen. How can this happen? For this to happen, what are the things that you need to address? One of the things that you need to address, as I told you, renewable generation, which happens to be intermittent. It will not be constant. It will be changing. There will be change in demand. User demand will change. So when you remain at home, you switch on your AC at some times to make it smaller, to bring it to the context of home. You will switch on or switch off something through the day. So similarly, if you get into an industry, larger things, there will be industries which will be in batch process. There will be industries which will be running only through the day. So that demand will keep on changing through the day. So it will remain highest during the evening, and then again it will go down. Then there is the grid infrastructure that will limit. So grid infrastructure is something that needs to be augmented. If grid infrastructure is not augmented, you will not get anything. Like even if power is available, it may not flow from one end to the other. Another one is when you are able to forecast what is being generated. Say based on whatever weather forecasts are there, you can forecast as to what could be my generation tomorrow from solar. What is the likely wind speed, and based on that, what will be my wind generation tomorrow? And based on that, what will happen is you will adjust your thermal power. So what further stops is there is a lack of policies. There are a lot of private operators. There will be subsidiaries. There will be corporates which will be blocking it. They'll have their own requirements. So what to do now? So what you need to do is what are the different solutions that are there to make the grid stable along with renewables? One is smart grids. When we say smart, the grid which has got digital technologies embedded to it, it has sensors and softwares that will transmit data from one place to the other, and it is readily available to all generators, like the generators who are as backup, like hydel generation will be as backup, thermal generation will be as backup. They know when to ramp up, and they are given their choice to ramp up in time. So what else will be there when we say a smart grid? There will be digital communication, advanced metering, distributed energy resource, and grid automation and control. There are additional things that need to come up along with renewables. One of them being energy storage. Many of us might have heard of something called battery energy storage, BESS as we call it, or hydro pumping or pumping storage systems that are available. Then you need some more flexible power plants. Currently, there is a lot of inertia that is there in terms of power plants. Thermal power plants cannot simply bring up and bring down loads as and when required. Then we also have like distributed energy sources. What you do to to address the grid infrastructure limitation during daytime, whatever peaks you register, you find a lot of rooftop solars that are now installed on homes. So what they do is they will bring down the load on the grid. The power flow required for that area will reduce during those hours. Another one is grid firming, as it is called. When we say grid firming, what happens is you add another energy source. It may be BESS, it may be hydro source, or whatever it is. Then you do the grid balancing. That is done by the distribution stations that are there. The distribution stations, what they do, they match the load with the consumption, or load with the supplies. If it does not match, they'll be shedding something. Then grid stabilization. How do you do this grid stabilization? You establish certain codes, you establish certain penalties, which are like which will be there and which will be deterring people from going beyond that. Okay. So better forecasting, I told you, pumped hydro storage, we have talked of. Strengthening the grid infrastructure that needs to improve, that may be age old. There are restrictions at many places. And the co-location of BESS along with the solar project. So these are a few things that need to be there. So just to tell that as to how this affects, we had high frequency on 4th, 11th and 25th of August in 24. This was contributed to renewable energy resources. So what happened, what government did was they asked an agency to analyze as to how and what happened in this case. In this case, what happened was thermal power plant did not bring down the load to that extent. Hydel power plants were restricted in terms of that reservoirs were full. They had to allow water flow through them. So they had to continue with the generation. Whereas there was sun. So you had solar generation also. So frequency went as high as 50.4 and it remained there for days average. It was day's average was 50.05. So this is one of the issues that has got in with renewable. On this, what was the recommendation that has come up? What are the recommendations that have been given is we need some kind of storage. We also need to allow certain flexibilities. Certain flexibilities in terms of certain states have specified that the generating stations, the IPPs, cannot bring down their load beyond a certain extent. They have been allowed to operate as at a 60% of PLF. 60% PLF, they cannot go below 60% PLF. So they have to take care of all this. So all this, unless and until corrected, they will not be able to bring down generation. Further, there is a scheduling that is done. So that quick scheduling is not allowed or schedule changes are not allowed very frequently. Unless and until those changes are allowed, nobody will inject lesser so as to get lesser revenue. So to achieve grid flexibility, what has been done, MNRE has proposed certain things in terms of improvements in grid stability. What are those? They have proposed cycling of thermal power plants, optimizing of hydro, improving the accuracy of generation forecasts, shifting agriculture demand. Agriculture demand to be shifted so as to match these demands. Agriculture is one of the sectors other than industry which gives us a higher demand. Normally at many places earlier you used to find agriculture supply was made available only during night hours. So such electrical demand shift is something that Ministry of Renewable Resources wants to have. The National Electricity Plan, it envisages the use of energy storage systems. It is sort of mandated that 25% of the energy that you are capable of generated should be backed up by your BESS or any other energy source or PSP, that is hydraulic storage systems. Another issue that is there in terms of this renewable generation is not available everywhere. Renewable generation, not all governments have promoted renewables in the same manner. So what has happened on this? On this, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, and Karnataka are the major generators in terms of renewables. When you look at other areas, one of them being Punjab is restricted for power flow from outside. That is not because government does something. That is because of the infrastructure. The grid stops them from doing that. They need to have additional lines. So additional lines, additional grid infrastructure needs to be provided so that power flows from one side of the country to the other side of the country. As one knows, see, we are a country which sees sunshine right from 7 o'clock in the morning to evening 7 o'clock from east to west. It is only that when we need to balance that generation, we need to have that generation facilities. Some may be required in Arunachal Pradesh and others in Rajasthan, so as to have end-to-end generation throughout the day, at least during daytime. Entire sun rays can be utilized through the day. So these are the few steps that can help improve upon our renewable energy resources, and government based on these improvements envisages to get more generation from renewable by 2030 and reduce the generation from non-renewables, that is largely thermal sources, that will have to be reduced considerably. But yes, it is still far off till we improve upon our grid. Our grid improvements are necessary even if we grow smaller steps at different areas. Yes, grid improvement will help renewable growth like anything. Thank you.